Sometimes models are really detail dense and complex. I mean, just check out the Cathay Sky Lantern. When painting this thing, you have to paint the gondola, the support ropes, the lantern, the crew, the magistrate hidden at the back there, and even the stuff dangling underneath it. Now, you can't build this model as one piece and be able to paint all of this to any sort of degree of satisfaction. So what do? Well, you build the miniature in sub-assemblies. We get asked about sub-assemblies all the time because we frequently use them in our painting videos. So in this video, we're going to take a deep dive on the subject to show you my process of how I figure them out for painting tutorials, but also for my own hobby. And to do so, we're going to be using a case example of one of Games Workshop's amazing new Space Marine characters. So first of all, what is a sub-assembly? Well, essentially it's a smaller assembly of a larger overall miniature that you keep separate, aided with various things such as accessing details on them. When approaching a miniature, it's always a good idea to keep this in mind, especially with larger ones. And really, there are a few things you should ask yourself, and I tend to go with three main questions. First of all, can you access all the details if you stick it all together, or are things going to get in the way? And if they are, you probably want to try and keep those bits separate. Secondly, when it comes to undercoating the miniature, are there large parts that would really benefit from being undercoated with a different colour? And if so, can you keep those separate too? And the third thing is, do you really need to keep that bit separate? Because personally, I find if you have tons and tons of sub-assemblies that are scattered all over your desk, it's really discouraging and it really stops me from actually finishing a miniature if there are loads of them. So I really do recommend you keep it to a minimum to really aid with pushing you to finish the miniature. Now, to give you an example of this in action, we're going to take another look at that Sky Lantern because it has a really good narrative about how the sub-assemblies really make themselves with a model like this. And I've got it just here. And what we'll do, we'll start out by taking a look at the crew. Now, as you can see, the crew are very detailed, so you really do want to make sure that you paint these separately like regular miniatures. But if you do, when it comes time to sticking them into the gondola here, these ropes are going to get in the way, which means the ropes probably should be separate as well. Now this leads us up to the lantern, which is actually quite heavy, and if the ropes aren't there, they're not supporting it, meaning that actually you risk damaging all the structure around here, so the lantern should also be separate. And then if we go back down to the gondola, which you're now left with, well, all the supporting structure down here, this is all very fragile, and it'll prevent you from actually putting it down safely, and there's a high risk of damaging that. So you can see how it kind of leads itself into all these various assemblies. It's also got a benefit to it though, because that lantern is actually best off undercoated with a much lighter colour than everything else. And if that's a separate piece, you can very easily do that. Now it's quite clear with that what you should do, but when it comes to other miniatures, it can be a little bit more personal in your choices, or it can actually be a bit more contentious. And that's certainly the case when it comes to things such as a Space Marine. So I've got an example here of an Imperial Fist Intercessor, and you can see this miniature has his bolt gun right across his chest. Now a lot of people like to keep that separate so they can access the detail on there, but personally I find it really annoying that his hands are attached to the bolter, so I can paint all the miniature, but then I've got to paint his hands to match, and it just kind of irks me, and I find it quite discouraging in finishing the miniature. So that's where a personal taste can really come into mind, but basically it's entirely up to you. So to recap that, the first thing to look for is to ask yourself, can you access all those details? The second thing to wonder is, would some parts benefit from being undercoated with a different colour? And the third thing is to make sure that you're not doing too many, because if you do, it's really hard to encourage you to actually go ahead and finish the miniature. But with all that in mind, what we're going to do is put that into practice with a case example, and for this we're going to start out with Captain Lysander of the Imperial Fists. So here he is, Darnath Lysander. This is the guy we're going to be building, and first of all what we should do is take a close look at the imagery that appears on the instruction booklet just to get a loose idea of how we might want to approach painting this. Because first of all, looking at this, that yellow power armour, I know straight away that's best undercoated with a yellow or a white or an off-white or something like that. Whereas the cloak, his head, the shield and the hammer, they'd be better undercoated with something a little bit darker, something like a khaki or a grey. So what I'd like to do is try and keep that armour as one piece with everything else as separate assemblies around it. Now something else to bear in mind is going to be the shield, which covers up so much of that side of the body, so we definitely want to keep that separate. And his head, well, it is quite close to that arch on that side there of the armour. Now, I know that it's going to be difficult to get to those areas, so hopefully we can keep that head separate as well. So I've got a loose idea of what we're looking for. So the next thing to do is take a look at the instructions, and the early stages are just indeed building his body. So you can see the legs, and we've got the torso goes on there in the back of it. The hammer is indeed probably going to have to be glued to the main assembly because his forearm's on it, and I'd like to keep all that armour together. But it's pretty straightforward up until we get to this point just here, where I can see that cloak is going to have to cause a few considerations. That's not a problem though. We'll cover that bridge when we come to it, because in the meantime we want to make a start by getting that core body made. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is start building him now all the way through to stage 4. We interrupt this tutorial to give you a commercial break from us, because if you're really enjoying this content and want to learn more techniques, then what you should do is check out our website, which is duncanrhodes.com. This is our membership website, which is packed full of loads of content dedicated to teaching you the skills you need to paint the miniature armies of your dreams. On the website is a large section dedicated to techniques, and this covers loads of different subjects in detail, such as things like edge highlighting, dry brushing, doing blending, and much more. And this is all supported by our Fundamentals of Miniature Painting course, which, if you're new to the hobby, is designed to give you a really firm foundational set of skills to build upon as you continue your journey. Now, besides this, we also have miniature painting videos focused on specific miniatures, and there are loads of these, well over 500 at this point, and these cover all your favourite games, from Games Workshop's Warhammer, of course, to loads of other things like fantasy, science fiction, and historical miniatures too. As well as this, we have a thriving community of people, and every month we do giveaways and competitions. So if you're looking to learn new skills and really grow on your journey in the miniature painting hobby, then be sure to go and check it out. So at this stage I'm feeling very happy, because all these components here are basically our first sub-assembly, because all of this is best undercoated with a light colour, so a white, an off-white, a yellow, something like that to aid with that yellow power armour, but all the parts around it will be better off undercoated with a darker colour, and that includes the cloak that we're now encountering. Now the cloak is actually our first challenge with this miniature because of how it goes together. The cloak is made of two pieces that basically stick together like this and go over one of his shoulders. Now if you glue those together, you won't be able to get it onto the other assembly because it's too tight fitting, which means you're forced to keep these two parts separate. So this now raises the question of how exactly you're going to put this together. Basically, you could stick it all together and face the challenge of painting the inside of the cloak and the back of the armour. But like I say, I want to keep it separate for access to detail and to undercoat with different colours. So we need to decide what to do here. The cloak, as you can see, fits very tightly on the back of the armour, so it goes there like that, whereas this bit goes around the front. So either we can have three pieces, or I can stick this front on here and keep the cloak separate. And I think that's the better option, because remember my principle here, keep it minimal, as few sub-assemblies as possible. Now the trick about the front of the shoulder here is that it doesn't really lock on in a particular area, and instead relies upon the back of the cloak to do that. But it does still have some contact points on. So to get this all to fit in the right position, what we need to do is start by dry fitting that cloak onto the back, which we've got just there. You see it fits very snug and very tight to the miniature there. Then we're going to put a little bit of glue on the contact points that we've got on the shoulder, and you can see there's two of them right here, these little rods that stick out. So a bit of glue there, and carefully a little bit of glue there so it doesn't get onto the cloak. And then what we can do is take the front of the shoulder pad and just match it up there into position so it sits snugly against the cloak, and then all we're going to do is just hold this for a minute or two for that glue to set. Now the glue is dry, you can see this comes apart nicely and the front of the shoulder is in position. So these two are our first two sub-assemblies all ready to go. And I have gone ahead and got some other parts ready as well. So for example, I have the shield just here, and you can see the shield fits on very nicely as a separate piece right there, but it does cover a lot of the miniature, so it is definitely a good idea to keep that as a separate piece. We also have his head, which again I have cut out and cleaned up, but I've not glued it in because it really does get hidden away inside there. So definitely want to be painting that separately too. And then finally we do have the base, which has like a scenic area that goes on the round base itself, and that is just here. Now the miniature fits quite nicely on there, it's quite snug, and you could simply glue those together and paint there if you want to. It doesn't really obscure very much, but I'd really like to undercoat this part with a different colour to the main body just here. So what you could do is just undercoat them both, immediately stick them together, or paint them entirely separately. The choice really was yours. But at this stage we've got all our sub-assemblies, so now what we need to do is figure out how to handle them as we paint them. Because if we take a look at a piece like the head just here, you can see it's tiny, we can't really hold it like this as we're painting it. So the solution is to mount it on some sort of stand so we can handle that whilst painting this piece. Now some people like to use cork with a little bit of paper clip or something sticking out of it, but what I like to do is just get a spare base. So I'll just grab one and then drill a hole through the middle of it. Then I take a paper clip and twist it so I can thread it through. And then super glue it onto the underside. With that done, we then get the piece that's going to get mounted with a hole drilled into it and somewhere where you're not going to see it, so for example the neck here. And then with just a small amount of super glue, I stick the paper clip into the head. And with that done, you can see now it's going to be much easier to paint the head because we can handle the base as we do it. So nice and straightforward, always a good idea to do this where possible. And having done that, we're now left with 5 separate sub-assemblies. So we should take a quick look now at each of these pieces in turn because there are a few quirks to point out in doing this kind of thing. And the first is on the shield, which I have also mounted on a paper clip. But remember, you need to find somewhere where it's not going to be seen once you put everything together. And when it comes to the shield, the only option is in this recess where his hand's going to go. So that means the only possibility is to drill a hole underneath that computer screen just there. When you're doing something like this, do take care. Don't drill too far so you go out the front of the shield. And also, you only need a very small amount of super glue there. So this way, you're not going to clog that recess with any glue, so everything still fits well in the end. Now, when it comes to Lysander's body, again, what you should do is mount it on some sort of base, but in this case, you don't need the paper clip because instead, what you can do is just glue his foot onto a spare base like this, with just a little bit of super glue once again. So nice and stable, we can handle this base as we're painting him. Now, you only need a little bit of super glue there, but super glue is a deliberate choice. Don't use plastic glue for this sort of thing, and it's because super glue is brittle, meaning when the time is right, it's quite easy just to crack the two pieces apart, so we can take that base away and then do the final assembly. Now, there's another thing we should look at as well, which is going to be the actual base of the miniature with the scenic bit on it. There's no requirement here to mount it on anything because we can just hold the base as we're painting that. But there is one piece which is going to cause us a bit of trouble again, and that is, of course, the cloak. Now, that's because when it comes to the cloak, there's basically nowhere to hide a hole for the pin to go in. So there's basically nowhere nice and stable for it, essentially. The shoulder pad's not thick enough. It's too likely we're going to damage the back of the cloak if we drill in there. And anywhere we do stick a paper clip to it, it's going to show up. So instead, what we're going to do is have to factor this into the painting plan for this miniature. What I do is plan to paint as much of the back of the miniature as possible. So all the yellow arm will be done, then we do all the machinery around here, and on the cloak, I'd paint the inside of the cloak whilst handling it on the back of it there like that. Now, only once that's done will I stick these together, and then in the full assembly like this, we're ready to paint the red cloak, and we can also make sure it blends onto the front there as well. So that will be part of the plan when painting the miniature like this. So there we go, that's all the sub-assemblies. So with all that done, what we can now do is undercoat these parts. So I'm going to go outside and do that with the 2 separate colours I want. I think I'm probably going to go for Wraithbone and Desert Sand here for the various pieces, but I'll see how I go. When we come back, we'll see it all ready to be painted. And here we have all the sub-assemblies undercoated and ready to go. And you can see just how useful this is, being able to undercoat in 2 different colours here, because it means for Lysander's armour, we're going to get that nice vibrant yellow that you want from Imperial Fist really easily, but all the other details are going to be nice and easy to base coat as well. So there you go, that's really all there is to it when it comes to creating sub-assemblies for your miniatures. Now, there are times it's going to be more complicated because of the sheer nature of the miniature, but those 3 principles still apply, so remember those. The first thing is to make sure that you can access all the details that can be seen easily. The next thing is to look for good opportunities to keep parts separate so you can undercoat them with an appropriate colour to aid with that base coating stage. And the third thing is to make sure you don't go overboard and don't do sub-assemblies when you don't need to, because if you have loads, then it's really discouraging when it comes to actually getting the miniature finished. But as long as you keep those 3 things in mind, you'll definitely be able to pick out some really good sub-assemblies on your miniatures. So I really hope you found that interesting and useful, and we'll see you again very soon.